the central rot of our criminal legal system is that we equate prison with justice. But more often than not, prison is a psychological salve. It's like a the symbolic value of prison is so valuable to society because it allows us to just put all the people that we don't want to think about or take responsibility for over there, out the way, so we don't have to engage with it. When actually, materially, what prisons do is they just warehouse people for a period of time and then chuck them out, often homeless, completely traumatized, most likely having developed a drug addiction from inside prison and brutalized. And I don't think that's justice.
You're watching Enough About Me with Janey Starling, the co-director of the feminist charity Level Up. Hey, Janey.
Hi.
Tell us about yourself. I just introduced you, but what is Level Up?
So Level Up is a gender justice campaigning organisation. We are not a charity. We are deliberately not a charity because we are very political in what we do. So we campaign to basically move the needle on issues affecting women and non-binary people and marginalised people due to their gender in the UK. Our lead campaigns are to end the imprisonment of pregnant women and mothers, to change the way the media reports fatal domestic abuse, to break the culture of silence around sexual violence in football, and to decriminalise abortion. So we cut across loads of different issues. And I think anyone looking in would be like, what's the connection between all of those like four massive issues? And the connection is bodily autonomy and dignity. So we really believe that your body is your own. It doesn't belong to your partner. It doesn't belong to the state. And everybody should be able to live their lives free from individual and state violence. And so when you look at sexual violence, domestic homicide, restrictions on abortion, and obviously incarceration, the through line is bodily autonomy.
So was there an impulse that made you go, right, I need to set up this organisation?
So Level Up, I didn't set it up. I used to work in the staff team. Level Up was founded by a group of brilliant women of colour in the campaign space in the UK. The former director is a legendary woman called Caris Afoko, who everything I know about campaigning and comms I learned from Caris. And Level Up kind of ran for 18 months back in 2018.
Okay.
And I was part of that staff team. And then we ran out of money, wound down, and then in the pandemic, some magical things happened, which meant the organisation was reborn, and it was reborn with Caris's blessing, with me in co-directorship, with a woman called Shay Faladin-Lybird. So we run it together in a co-directorship, and we've got a really small team, but we punch well above our weight.
So why is Level Up needed?
Level Up is needed because I think, there are a lot of women's organisations in England. A lot of them are registered charities. A lot of them provide services to women. They don't necessarily build political power with women as political agents. You know, I see in a lot of really, really, brilliant organisations who are doing frontline work on domestic abuse, on sexual violence, whose work is incredible. You can't dispute it. But there's something about that professionalised feminist space which turns women into service users as opposed to political agents. And for Level Up, we really believe in, I cut my teeth on direct action and the trade union movement. So for me, you build power. You build power to disrupt the violent system. You don't, knock on someone's door with a policy briefing and ask nicely. You really have to shake things up and become really irritating and impossible to ignore. So for example, a few years ago when Ronaldo was returning to Manchester United and he still had an ongoing rape case against him in the States, we were like, how is he getting a hero's welcome and no one's talking about this rape case? So we decided to fly a plane over the match at kickoff. I mean, we didn't actually fly the plane, paid a man to fly the plane, which said the survivor's name, trailing behind it. So I think it's just one example of if you can't make them listen, you force them to listen. We were basically on the pitch. All the global media reported on it because we disrupted his return game. And I think it's that kind of like energy and willingness to really, you know, shake things up that is necessary to spark the change that we need, but also is like really fun to do.
I mean, football is a interesting one. I'm not going to pretend like I know loads about football culture because I don't, but it's like there's always something going on in football with sexual violence with these men, and it's tough. It's a tough battle to fight because of the position they hold in our society as heroes. And so what challenges did you find like facing that? Because like he is like probably the number one hero for like men across the world.
Yeah.
Like, did you have pushback? Did that deter you at all?
Well, the reason we flew the plane is because no one wanted to talk about it. No one would talk about it. Yeah. So we kind of had to put it in. We literally flew it across the media box at the stadium because we were like, if you are not going to talk about this, we're going to have to force you to talk about it. At the end of the day, football is business. Football is big money. It's big business. And there's a lot of NDAs. There's a lot of really, really dirty tactics to silence women. And it's not unique. It's not that like footballers are this like special, you know, breed of people who are exceptionally violent towards women. Like there is a lot of violence against women, but you find it in all other professions where people are granted huge amounts of power. I mean, we had the whole Me Too thing kicking off in Hollywood for very much the same reasons, because sexual violence is about power and control, right? So anywhere that someone is granted almost infinite power and control, they will abuse that power.
You said that stunt helped get the media's attention, right?
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a crossover with some of your campaigns. It's how you get people's attention.
Yeah.
Did you learn that from kind of direct action?
Yeah, 100%.
Direct action work.
100%. You have to disrupt.
So the Dignity for Dead Women campaign, which is specifically about media.
Yes.
What was the situation in media? What were the patterns you were seeing in media that you thought this is not on? This needs to change. What were some of those, that situation?
So back in 2018, the Level Up team, we used to read the papers every single day. We used to go through the papers every single day just to see what's going on in the news across all the political spectrum. You know, read the Sun or read the Times. And there was a particular summer, it was the summer of 2018, and we were just like repeatedly seeing these stories about men who had killed their partners or ex-partners. And the way that it was reported was so diabolical in the sense that the headlines would very often hinge the man's murder of his partner around her actions. So you would see these headlines that are like, you know, man kills wife, or like even worse, like hubby kills wife after her lesbian affair. Or you'd find really sensationalized stories, you know, in the Mirror that we're talking about man kills wife after she mocked the size of his penis. Like, that's a real headline.
Oh, wow.
I know. Really, really spurious, really ridiculous.
As if that is like a reason.
Right, exactly. So it's like as if, you know, that could be justifiable, but also as if like, you know, it hinges on one event, when actually what we know about domestic homicide is that it's something that happens at the end point of a sustained period of coercive control. It's something that happens, you know, when violence and control has been culminating, and very often happens when the woman has decided to leave her partner. But none of that was being reflected in this reporting. And I think to the trained eye, you're like, how is it in any way ethical to report on this woman's case in this way? You know, there's no dignity for her. There's no dignity for her family. There's also no public education or awareness on where these deaths come from. They don't come out of the blue. They don't just happen one day. You know, it is the end point to a sustained period of harm, and people need to know that. And ultimately, the way that we prevent more women being killed is by changing the way that we understand those murders to be something that is totally preventable. And the first place to start is the way that we talk about them. So we really saw it as an urgent intervention, similar to how in the UK with suicide reporting, there's really strict rules because journalists know that they have a public duty to prevent suicide. They know that if they report, you know, as a journalist, when you're reporting on suicide, you're not allowed to report on the methods. If there's a note, you're not allowed to publish it. There's really stringent reporting criteria on suicide because we all understand that suicide is a public health problem and it's preventable, right? Well, there's so much around suicide prevention. It's not just this like random awful thing that happens. Right. And so our goal with Dignity for Dead Women was to reframe fatal domestic abuse as a public health issue, much in the same way as suicide is, where journalists would think, oh, okay, I have to be really careful about how I report this, not only because I could give future perpetrators ideas, but also because there might be women who are in these, situations and relationships who might recognize some of those behaviors and need support to get out. So
such a good point, yeah.
That's why we launched the campaign. And I work really closely with two brothers called Luke and Ryan Hart, whose father killed their mother, Claire, and sister Charlotte in 2016. And the Hart brothers, the way that their case was reported on was so disrespectful. The media were referring to their father, who just killed their mum and sister, as a DIY nut, as a nice guy, basically saying he's like pillar of the community. And I think what was most chilling about their case, we've trained like hundreds of journalists together over the years. They helped develop the media guidelines, which we produced. What was most chilling about their case is that when the police seized their father's computer to look for evidence, they found that he had been searching for media coverage of men who had killed their families. So he had been looking at media articles about how what he was going to do was going to be reported. And I think whenever I say that to journalists, they are completely chilled.
So you see the complicity, the kind of...
100%. Yeah. Exactly. And I think what I will always say to journalists, and I've trained hundreds of journalists and journalism students at this point, is, you don't want your article to inadvertently be giving, justification to a future perpetrator. You've got to be really careful. So the principles for Dignity for Dead Women is really, really simple. They're like so straightforward. The acronym is AIDA, so AIDA. Accountability, literally name it as domestic abuse, name the perpetrator. Images, be really respectful of the pictures that you use the picture that the family have provided. Don't go snooping around Facebook to try and find something else. We've had families who've said, why have they found a picture of my sister in a bikini on holiday when we already sent them the picture? Why have they done this? Similarly, with women who are Muslim and the family have provided a picture of her in her hijab, and then the press have trawled through Facebook to find one without her hair being covered. Dignity, just remembering that this is one article for you, but for a woman's children, this is the kind of public record of her life and death. So just be mindful of that. Just center a woman's dignity in all of your reporting and accuracy. So honestly, just like putting the domestic abuse helpline at the bottom, saying that this is domestic abuse, not some like freak horror incident perpetrated by a monster. It's it's something that happens twice a week.
It got me thinking about how much it's in our culture, right? And how much there is to change, and how much people probably don't even think about it until they get something shown to them. And it just made me think of Othello, and how that story is shown, and how he's just like this noble person who just has too much honor, and he can't live with it, and he needs to do it. And how, I guess even in that play, that the jealousy of men is actually understood and is manipulated. That's like the whole point. Like, you can manipulate a man into doing it, but it's still, just how much that's through our thread of our culture today.
Yes.
And so do you get, are people generally quite welcoming to this kind of, I'm talking about journalists now.
Yeah.
Or do you get pushback, like, from different types of publications? Like,
I just want the Othello point is just like so bang on, because I think the only reason the media are able to publish these kind of narratives is because we've got this like really deeply held, almost subconscious cultural trope of the jealous lover, of the jilted lover who needs to kind of like defend his honor.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is really just woven in, in terms, we live in a patriarchal society, in terms of violence against women, men seeing women as property and, exerting control and needing to defend their reputation. It's so insidious, though. It's everywhere. And we need to disrupt that cultural narrative and our understandings of that in order to end it. And until we do that, we're not going to stop men killing women. But in terms of publications, we've pretty much trained everyone except the male. The male are the only ones I'm sure to no one's surprise, who refused to engage. We've trained the Sun, we've trained the Mirror, Metro.
You train the Sun and not the Mail. I guess the Sun is a bit more like... Yeah.
They were way more receptive and way more open. And yeah.
The Express?
The Metro, not the Express. They're not real paper. No, but the Metro were I think we've done the Metro twice. People are receptive. And they you know what's interesting? They want to have this conversation on an individual level as well, because domestic abuse affects like 1 in 4 women. You know, if I'm training a newsroom and there's like 20 to 30 people on this training, a significant number of them will have either experienced domestic abuse directly or will know someone who has. So we've all got skin in the game in these conversations. And I think, you know, more often than not, what comes out in the conversations is that sub-editors are like, yes, we want it to be, we want to, you know, not write sensationalist headlines. We understand what you're saying about dignity, but like, if we were just sticking to the facts, then twice a week we'd be saying the same headline, which is, you know, man kills his wife because, you know, he's controlling and abusive. Like, how do we strike that balance between crafting something that's interesting enough that people will want to read it, because we do want journalists to write about these cases, it's important, and not crossing that line. So we end up having really interesting, nuanced conversations. But, you know, I've not really been in a training where there's been that much aversion to it. People want to help. And when they realise that it's, you know, something that can be seen similar to suicide and they have a role and they have a purpose in prevention, they're quite forthcoming.
I mean, everyone has... so many people have experienced it. And, like, the women in, like, my life, and I'm not going to, like, drag out people's business, like, publicly, but, like, I know women who, like, more than one relationship, and often that can be the case, with domestic violence and then, like, stalking, essentially. And,
which is a risk factor for homicide.
And after it's ended, and in that experience, both times they've gone to the police, and both times the response has been very much like, well, there's not a lot we can do, kind of
Call
thing,
us when
you
you're
know?
dead.
Yeah, basically. And a lot of the stories that you read, you find the woman has gone to the police at that point, and you go, it is shocking, and I honestly think as well, like, from that man's perspective, they are. It's not that they're mentally ill, but they need to be trained in, like, how to allow things to be let go of, how to see people as, like, autonomous human beings who can change their mind about something,
right?
And being able to handle that emotionally, and because that is the crux of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. It's like a combination of systemic power, but also the very basics of emotional regulation. These men are extremely insecure and needy, and also something really profound that Luke Hart, one of the brothers who I just mentioned, said. He said that our father thought his self-pity was worth more than our mother's life. And I think it is really, for me, that self-pity, that's the number one identifier. The degree of self-absorption that, you know, people who kill their partners or seriously abuse their partners have is what needs to be disrupted. And I think the point you made around the stalking and how the abuse escalates after the relationship has ended is something we don't talk about enough, because often the conversation is, well, why doesn't she just leave? As if, like, you know, as soon as she leaves, it's all going to disappear, when actually it gets worse. And a lot of women do know that, especially if they've got children, especially if they have to go through family court and shared custody with a perpetrator. And I think for me, witnessing domestic abuse, my own experiences of it, but also, you know, in friends and family, you can kind of tell the dynamics of a relationship once it's ended. They become really clear. It becomes really, really clear, you know, who is really being quite cruel and who is just trying to get on with their life.
Yeah. So you have kind of answered this, but what is an ideal situation where this campaign from Level Up has succeeded? What does that world look like for you, and how does that help women?
Well, I mean, I would love, the campaign's objective is to change the media discourse on domestic abuse, fatal domestic abuse. And the reason we chose fatal domestic abuse is because that is often the point where it gets reported in the media, because it is so extreme and it's so awful. I think for us, obviously, like, better coverage, and we've already started to see that quite significantly compared to where we were 10 years ago. More dignified reporting, headlines that do not blame a woman for her own death, more use of the National Domestic Abuse Helpline in the footer, really basic stuff. Not publishing pictures of the weapon, publishing pictures that the family provided, like really basic things. I mean, obviously, long term, I would love to see a society where men stop killing women. I would love to see a society that we can have really intelligent conversations around domestic abuse and how to intervene and how to prevent it, so people aren't just left to police or nothing, and often the police don't do anything anyway.
That, and like you said about the case with the Hart brothers of the dad essentially researching the situation is something that I hadn't actually thought of before. Now, the case that is happening right now with these three boys who raped a girl, two girls, sorry, and that's had an interesting public reaction.
Yeah.
But you can see the thread of how the justice system has elevated the care of the boys, or whatever they want to call it, over the care of the victims and the girls, and have put people through. It's interesting, not to go on a tangent, but you talked about services and how services often can be re-traumatizing for people, and so can a trial. A trial can be re-traumatizing for people. And we saw in the judge's comments that that re-traumatizing experience for the girls was almost not even considered when he laid his judgment down. Yeah. Where do you sit on? Do you have any thoughts on that particular case and where we're at with it and what it says about the justice system?
I have so many thoughts.
Okay, let's see if we can get.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
I think what I want to start with is by acknowledging how exceptional this case is, because I think it's exceptional in many respects. The first being that, these are all children. The victims and the perpetrators are all children. We're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-olds. It's exceptional because it is a rape case that has concluded and ended in convictions, when statistically the vast majority of rapes never get reported. Only 1 in 6, it's estimated, 1 in 6 rape survivors will report to the police. And of those who do report, only 3% will lead to a charge. So the vast majority of rapes are completely outside of the criminal legal system. I say criminal legal system because it's very rarely about justice, and that's a whole other part of this conversation. But it's an extremely exceptional case. And the narrative, the discourse has been around their sentence. It, even in the way that the media has reported this, there has been, I listened to the BBC interview that features one of the girls, and she's talking about how, she's afraid that she will bump into them again if they're kept in the community. She says she wants freedom for herself. She's clearly so traumatized. It's just so distressing. It's really, really distressing. And she said that she's speaking out because she wants to give other people strength to speak out, because she acknowledges this is a systemic problem. But the main discourse has been, these sentences are too lenient. Yeah. And they need to be referred to the Attorney General, and these boys need to go to prison. And I think it's so reductive that we have a criminal legal system in which justice and prison are seen to be the same thing. Yeah. We understand that justice is prison and nothing less. The state has decided that for us, when in reality, justice looks different for every single different person. Healing and justice are two completely separate things. You know, more than anything, this girl needs to heal. And I think it's really unfortunate that such a complex issue, which I see as a complete failing of society. I think if we have young boys who are doing this to a young girl and filming it and uploading it online, there's so many failings in society for that to happen. I also believe, and I think it's really difficult to speculate, but in my professional opinion, I don't think a child as young as 13 and 14, as these boys were, is capable of that kind of brutality unless they've experienced it themselves.
Yeah. Violence
is learned, sexual assault is learned. I won't go any further into that, but I think it's a question that we need to bear in mind.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but I saw one of these LBC people go, they called them feral boys, right? And I think when you use words like feral, you're saying, oh, they've just raised themselves, but actually they are a product of an environment.
Exactly.
And we are in that environment.
We're all in it.
So calling them feral is actually, oh, we've got nothing to do with this. Actually, these are children who did something really heinous. We have to sit here and think, right, so how have our children come to this? Like, what failings have we, where are we at as a society that that's happening?
Exactly, but the model of criminalisation allows us all to exempt ourselves from that conversational responsibility by saying, these boys are feral, lock them up, throw away the key. I mean, the father of one of the girls was saying, you know, obviously we can't ask for a life sentence, but, you know, my daughter now has a life sentence, which in many ways is true. The trauma of sexual violence, it shapes you for life in ways that we will never truly, truly comprehend, but it does. But we have a very retributive justice system. We abolished the death penalty, but even the idea of the life sentence is basically a death penalty. It's an eye for an eye. You know, you've taken a life, you should have yours taken away from you. But prison and justice are not the same thing. And I think very similar to what we saw with the discourse around the Epstein files, where people wanted to talk about, you know, this horrendous elite who were abusing so many children. We don't want to talk about the fact that child sexual abuse is happening all the time in our communities. You know, the NSPCC estimate that 1 in 20 children are experiencing child sexual abuse. You know, it's so much easier for us to point the finger at feral boys over there, lock them up, than actually interrogate our own boys, our own communities, our own role in perpetuating cultural attitudes that underpin sexual violence and entitlement and violence against girls. But that's a conversation people don't want to have, and they don't want to see themselves as having a role in it. And in many ways, I see, you know, the work that I do now, obviously I campaign to end the imprisonment of pregnant women, is very much about the prison system. I'm a prison abolitionist. But I think like the central rot of our criminal legal system is that we equate prison with justice. But more often than not, prison is a psychological salve. The symbolic value of prison is so valuable to society because it allows us to just put all the people that we don't want to think about or take responsibility for over there, out the way, so we don't have to engage with it. When actually, materially, what prisons do is they just warehouse people for a period of time and then chuck them out, often homeless, completely traumatized, most likely having developed a drug addiction from inside prison, and brutalized. And I don't think that's justice.
No. What is justice then? When you think of justice, what does that look like?
Well, this is the thing. It's almost like, how long is a piece of string? Because it's going to be different for different people. We know that the justice that the criminal legal system enforces is only, you know, one very limited type, which is basically prison or nothing, or, you know, criminal conviction or nothing. When actually we've got a really burgeoning kind of group of organisations now in the UK that focus on restorative justice, which doesn't always sit separately to prison. Often someone is in prison while they are engaging in restorative justice with their victim. And obviously, you know, one of the most famous cases was a man called Jacob Dunn. There was a brilliant play called Punch. Yeah. Did you see it?
I didn't see it, but you've
got to see this play. Punch is amazing. But it's a real life story of a restorative justice process where he had killed someone's son, And the mother and father initially had, been so upset at the lenient sentence that he had got. They contacted, but they realized that him going to prison didn't resolve any of their grief. And they had so many questions. And he engaged in a restorative justice program with them. And it was transformative for everybody. And they're still in touch. And now they campaign together. And they've produced this play together. And I think, when we talk about the rupture that happens in our social fabric when people seriously harm each other, restorative justice is one way of people coming together and actually having their pain acknowledged, having questions answered, engaging in, a process of repair. And obviously it's not easy, it's not straightforward. You have to have willing consent from both parties. But it's so much more intelligent than just shoving someone in a box with the toilet in for a number of years. Similarly, a step further, if we want to talk about transformative justice is the idea, similar to what we were saying, it's like, what are the social conditions that have produced these boys? And how can we make sure this never happens again? What can we all do to now make sure that this never happens again? What do we need to be doing in terms of consent? What do we need to be doing in terms of child protection? How do we change the culture? And we all have a role to play in that. The police can't do that for us. There's this brilliant organization in the States called Generation 5 that aims to end child sexual abuse within 5 generations. And the first step is having community conversations around child sexual abuse. And it's excruciating because no one wants to have these conversations. But without having those conversations and actually getting involved in the really messy reality of human existence, we're never gonna make any progress. And really and truly, we're having this conversation at a time where we've got this like horrendous white supremacist far right refrain of protect our women and girls, and actually no one's willing to have the real conversation around child sexual abuse, who is perpetrating that, and what we can do to intervene in that. I mean, there's a helpline literally called Stop It Now by the Lucy Faithfull Foundation for people who are having sexual thoughts about children. And I'm like, I only found out about it recently through, all of the conversations around Epstein. And I'm like, why do we not know this more? Why do we not have these interventions?
It's weird because any kind of attempt to deal with that is met with like you're protecting nonsense kind of vibe. But that impulse also protects the problem, if you know what I mean. And you mentioned the far right and kind of Trump and MAGA. And I think that in many ways, the far right and the Christian conservative movement is almost like a distilled version of how our society functions in terms of the power structures that allow for abuse.
Oh my God, yeah.
And they're just the most like purest distilled version of it, which is like my pastor, like Trump, like, do you know what I mean? How did we end up in a society where if you can't question on the completely like micro level, it's like the patriarch in your family. If you can't question him, then he can abuse anyone in his family. And then you have situations where you've got an abuser who is a patriarch, he abuses his kids, they have kids, grow up, he's now the granddad abusing the grandchildren. And like that is like not an unheard of thing. Yeah, exactly. And that comes from, we can't question the power structure within our family. And you see it in the Catholic Church, what happened. And you're seeing it in MAGA. And it's like every other week I see a Christian conservative pastor who's been done for child abuse.
Kel Surprise, Rodney. Like, come on. Like, hello. I always just think all these people with their, like, protect our women and girls, I'm like, you're just wearing a badge that says I'm a nonce. Like, you actually, that is your central political concern. Like, that's such a normal, basic thing to want. Like, why is that the main thing you're organising around? And also to speak to the, like, Christian fundamentalist aspect of this, there's huge money behind this as well. This is why they're so against sexual consent education. They frame it as this, like, abstinence only, you can't teach children about bodily autonomy or sexual consent, because knowledge is power, and removing children's knowledge about their own bodies allows you to abuse them. Yeah.
And I constantly think about that, because a lot of that is about how, particularly if you're a conservative-minded person or a Puritan-minded person, you think, we can't teach the children about sex education. But that's about your own personal beliefs, and you might not realise it, but you're actually like priming your child to be a victim because they're not equipped with the information to know what's happening to them at the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's totally that. And I think there's so many different layers to it. And I think, there is evidence to show that early, you know, very, very basic. And there's always so many moral panics around this. Like, they want to teach primary school children about sex. It's like, no, we're just talking about like the really, really basic things that there's this NSPCC song called like the Pantosaurus. Oh, it's so catchy. It's like, it will be in your head for days. Someone needs to like,
I want to hear it.
I'm not going to sing
Okay,
it,
good.
okay? But the lyrics go, it literally goes, what's in your pants belongs only to you. And it's targeted at 4-year-olds. And it's as basic as that. Like, why? Why are we not saying that all the time? It's these really, really basic things. So yeah, I think to return to the concept of justice and social transformation, it is having these conversations. It is like reframing the way we discuss these things, being able to discuss these things in our families and with children, and being ready to all get involved rather than, again, the criminal legal system, the prison system, very conveniently takes it completely out of our hands. And it really doesn't work for so many victims. I think some of the most passionate and committed prison abolitionists I know are survivors of sexual violence, because they know they've been through, or they've not been able to get through the criminal legal system. They've been re-traumatized by it. And there's the recognition that really and truly the state and the criminal legal, you know, apparatus that we have is designed to protect the state and property. It's not designed to protect people.
Yeah. If you like look at the lifetime of like a man who is committing those kind of offences, it's like they were probably raised in some kind of violence.
Yeah.
And then they perpetrated it themselves. They went to prison, and then they're in this like wild, wild west of like sexual violence, committing it, being a victim of it. That doesn't, when by the time you come out, 7 years, whatever it is, you're not like suddenly, oh, now I'm ready for it. You know, now I'm ready for life. You're like in it. It's changed you as a person. And because you're an abolitionist, right? Let's talk about that, because I am. But then there's also this kind of like, I see justice, I think, in like 3 ways in which is this person like genuinely dangerous right now, and so needs to be separated from society for however long? Does the victim and the community feel like justice is being served, which is kind of like what we were talking about with those boys. Like, that's what's happened. No one feels like it's enough. And how do we, as a justice system, or how does we as a society make people feel like, okay, there's some kind of punishment, whatever. And then the third part is, how do we, for the betterment of society, how do we help rehabilitate this person, you know? And I guess that is, if you're on a pure level of like trying to achieve something, that is what prison, the justice system, should be trying to achieve in that movement. Because if someone is, like happened with these boys, if it's just about rehabilitating the boys, then the community doesn't feel like there's justice, you know? What are your thoughts on abolition? What does it mean to be an abolitionist?
I think first and foremost, you know, it's the recognition that, I mean, there's multiple things to acknowledge. I think, you know, for me, it really boils down to recognizing the symbolic versus the material reality of prisons and what prisons do, what they actually do, and the fact that they, without question, produce more problems than they set out to solve. Yeah. We've known that for such a long time now. All the evidence flies in the face of locking people up in prison, and yet we have this like rampant public discourse that prison is necessary, this idea that, you know, if we didn't have prisons, that the whole of the social order would like fall apart, and there'd be all these dangerous people out on the streets running amok, causing harm. When in reality, those people are already doing that anyway, and they're in government. It's just this idea that, you know, we need prisons for an ordered society, when it's just so untrue. Like I've said, when it comes to rape, and I think rapists are often invoked as like, what about the rapists? I'm like, I mean, is your rapist in prison? And they're like, no. I'm like, yeah. You know, it's only a very, very tiny minority of people who will be arrested, charged, taken to trial, convicted, and then sentenced to prison. And for so many survivors, it's not justice. On a very material level for me, and my work is on women in prison, and particularly pregnant women in prison, it's just really a astounding how much public money goes into incarcerating someone as opposed to supporting them in the community. So on average, it costs £80,000 to send a woman to prison for a year. And there's evidence to show that if she was kept in the community and she was supported by a women's centre that can like address the root causes of why she came before the court, which are really almost always domestic abuse, homelessness, addiction. I've met so many women who are in prison because of a man, directly or indirectly, because, you know, their partner was a drug dealer and because the drugs are in their shared home, she's a drug dealer too. Or someone has been directly coerced into committing crime. It's poverty and patriarchy that really intersect to drive women into prison. And if a woman is supported in the community, it costs between £2,000 and £4,000 compared to the £80,000 it would to send her to prison. And when we're being told, you know, there's not enough money for the NHS, there's not enough money for, you know, basic local mental health services, our mental health waiting lists are so long because there's not enough funding in that system. And we're seeing millions pumped into prisons without question. For me as an abolitionist, it's about where are the state resources going, and are they going into, you know, providing communities with the resources they need for safety, dignity, and belonging, which are like the three basics of a life worth living, or are they just being wasted by doing this thing that we've been doing for decades and not questioning that just produces so much harm? You know, 30 of the prisons that are still standing today are literally Victorian prisons. They're crumbling Victorian prisons. And, you know, the Victorian era was a brutal era. Is that something we're still just doing without question?
And it is like this, because I'm wondering, is it not normal? Is it like is like there's something within human beings that is like quite punitive, or is it encouraged? You know, like that kind of idea that like we need to lock people up, we need to punish them, and like that Victorian era, we are still kind of living in that era. But even then, we've also understood that, like, for example, you shouldn't go to prison for being in debt when you used to go into prison. And like, I am an abolitionist in the sense of like, there are most crimes that people go to prison for, they shouldn't be in prison. There are other ways to deal with those crimes.
100%.
So you deal with pregnant, or your area is pregnant women in prison. What is the current situation for pregnant women in prison?
So every year, around 200 pregnant women are sent to prison. And last year, there were around 50 births to pregnant women in prison. It's a high-risk environment for them. The reason I started doing this work was because 7 years ago, 2 babies died inside women's prisons because their mothers were left to go into labour inside their cell without any medical assistance. And both of those babies died. The cases were Rihanna Cleary in HMP Bronzefield. She went into labour in the night and she gave birth by herself. She felt she had no choice but to bite through the umbilical cord to a baby called Aisha, who was dead. She had rang for help on her cell buzzer and nobody came. And another case, a woman called Louise Powell, who went into labour in a prison in Manchester, HMP style. And she went into labour on a prison toilet. She was in agony, again, screaming for help for hours. And her baby was breech. It came out feet first. Any breech birth is, you know, an emergency birth because the baby can go without oxygen. Her baby also died. And I heard about these cases at the time, and I think I was so mortified that that could be allowed to happen. But I think what further shocked me was the response from government and some charities to improve access to healthcare for women in prison, when the obvious thing to anyone is that they should not be in prison. And so, you know, you asked what abolition means to me, and I think in many ways it means refusing the incarceration of our own minds and trying to be a bit more creative about how we deal with people. And so, you know, Level Up, the organisation that I run, has been campaigning for an end to the imprisonment of pregnant women for the last 7 years. We've lobbied the Sentencing Council. We've managed to change the sentencing framework. We've got women out of prison on sentence appeals so they can give birth safely. But it's an awful environment to be pregnant in. We know that pregnant women in prison are twice as likely to give birth prematurely. They're 7 times as likely to have a stillbirth. They are very likely to miss midwifery appointments, not because of their own fault, but because there's not enough staff to actually take them. Prisons are horribly understaffed. You know, they've had huge cuts during austerity, and many of them are still running on kind of COVID regimes where it's skeleton staffing, people are locked up in their cells for 23 hours a day, and that obviously creates huge barriers to healthcare access for anyone, not just pregnant women. I mean, healthcare in prison is diabolical, full stop. But when it comes to pregnant women, I think, you know, every minute counts if you go into labour, and if you have to go through several sets of locked doors and rely on at least 2 prison officers to get you to hospital, the risks are just unforgivable. But what we do know is that there are recent cases of pregnant women who are being handcuffed to officers during childbirth. And it's a practice that was meant to be outlawed around 30 years ago, because it amounts to inhuman and degrading treatment under Article 3 of Human Rights Act. And yet it is still happening. And, you know, there are cases of women who are being handcuffed to prison officers for 36 to 48 hours at a time while they're in childbirth. And I think the degree of cruelty that pregnant women in prison are experiencing is just so symptomatic of the prison regime, because if you're going to do that to a pregnant woman, what are you doing to everybody else? Yeah. There's no dignity, there's no respect for human life. And, you know, I had a conversation with a midwife recently about it, and she was like, where's the reverence for childbirth? Where's the respect?
That's what I was just thinking, yeah.
You know, there's like, the degradation is so extreme.
Because I think they think they're doing it to the woman, which they've obviously already dehumanized to a certain level. They're like, you're a criminal, but you're doing that to the baby as well.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, so the other question, sorry, I just wanted to ask you, is about the 2 stillbirths.
Yeah.
Talking about justice, like, to me, that is the state is responsible for that, for the murder of those children, essentially. Like, that's what I've read from that. Like, that was, you could say, oh, the prison staff, whatever, but the system is set up that caused it, in my opinion, right? Was there any kind of acknowledgement, justice, any kind of apology? How did anything happen with those 2 situations?
Thank you for asking that. So yes, there was one of them. There was an inquest. The case into baby Aisha Cleary. There was like a really long inquest. There were over 50 witnesses. The coroner ruled that she had been seriously failed by the prison and by the local authority, because she was also a care leaver, as 1 in 5 women in prison are. And I think what you tend to find, just as a side note, with women who are criminalised and incarcerated, is that they have been failed so badly much earlier on in life than before they even got into that prison. You know, prisons are just a reflection of the failings in our social safety net. In the case of baby Brook Powell, there wasn't an inquest, but there was recognition, and I believe the mother did receive an apology from the prison nurse. Again, it's not going to bring their baby back. And I think the fact, you know, Rihanna Cleary gave a really, really powerful televised statement to Channel 4 a couple of years ago, because the coroner ruled that she'd been seriously failed, but then didn't. So when there's an inquest, they'll kind of establish the causes of death and who's responsible, but also the coroner has the chance to produce what's called a prevention of future deaths report. So it gives recommendations to make sure that doesn't happen again. He decided not to do that. And she went on TV just to say, you know, even if he had, what happens on prison policy paper and what happens in practice are 2 completely different things, and prisons are just never going to be caring places. They just never will be. They are unreformable institutions. So there was, you know, some recognition. More of the recognition has come through the public. You know, Level Up has organised for people to send letters of solidarity to both the mothers. We've done vigils outside of the Ministry of Justice. We've done protests. You know, I think what I'm really interested by in terms of prisons and feminism and how we deal with deaths in custody is Judith Butler's concept of grievability, and the idea of, you know, whose life is worth grieving, and by extension, whose life is worth living and whose life is worth protecting. And I think there's this unspoken assumption in wider society that people who die in prison, those deaths are not grievable because they're already kind of out of society. And what's really central to, I guess, you know, level up's politics, but more broadly, the politics of prison abolitionists is that those lives are absolutely grievable. Those lives are absolutely sacred. How could we allow that to happen? How can we accept that as normal? And how can we keep sending people into those death traps that are our prisons?
I'm a bit woo-woo when it comes to this stuff, you know, because I do think there's like a spiritual kind of sickness that happens when you think someone, the state or anyone can come and put you in a box for years. Like that is like a crazy thing. And societies that do it on a large enough scale, or any society that does it, it's going to affect us all. Okay, it's not like it's a spirit. There's a spiritual like sickness that goes on, and the more that's in our culture, it affects us, and you see it in, and we're heading that way. You see it in like American culture, how like it's just within their culture that you put people in prison, and that's it. And I hate the argument that so we need a deterrent, and I'm like, if it was a deterrent, would our prisons be full?
Thank you.
What I mean?
And there is so much academic evidence that supports what you've just said. It's not a deterrent.
Yeah.
A custodial sentence is not a deterrent. It's been said again and again and again. There's so much evidence that shows it's not a deterrent. And I think, you know, to return to the case we were talking about earlier with the 3 boys and the question of custodial sentencing, you know, the former minister, Jess Phillips, said, what kind of message does this send? And it's like, what kind of message does the rest of society send around sexual violence, full stop, anyway? Like, why is sentencing about sending a message? There's so much investment in the symbolic value of sentencing and this really, like, wrong theory that it's a deterrent when it's not. Most people don't know what the sentencing regime is like. It's, like, extremely technical and complex. We've got one of the most sophisticated and technical sentencing regimes in the world. You know, you have to be highly experienced to become a judge who has the power to sentence people to prison for long periods of time, and for good reason. It's really, really complicated. Most people don't know what sentences accord to which crimes, and also people who decide to break the law often are willing to take the risk, either because they're in such precarious conditions of survival that they have no other alternative, or because they think they're not going to get caught.
Yeah, or they're institutionalized already. Do you know what I mean? Like, to them, it's not something they think about. Like, I know a lot of people for who prison is a cycle of life, for whom like life outside is very, very, very hard, and they're institutionalized.
We don't talk about that enough. It's absolutely the case, and particularly in women's prisons and in men's prisons, people who are struggling with addiction and street homeless, who will cycle in and out of prison because, as you said, life on the outside is so much more hostile than life inside. And prison effectively is a de facto form of social housing, where they are unable to be housed anywhere else. And if that isn't a complete admission of our society's failure to care for people, I don't know what else is.
Like that quote you said from Jess Phillips, like, look, I'm not Jess Phillips' biggest fan, okay?
Me neither.
I'm not sure I'm not, because she does a lot of campaigning and work around women and girls, so maybe we can talk about that. But like that specific quote, right, is just has such little faith in humanity. And actually, I'm thinking, like, I've got a history of addiction, right? And there was a time when I thought shoplifting was fine. It was something that was fine to do. Now I do not think that. And it is not because now I'm suddenly afraid of prison. It's that, like, it's just how I live my like the frequency on which I live my life has changed, and I just don't like. I just was like, oh, I want to spend money on booze, and I've got no money, and I want some booze, so I'm gonna get it. Or that's me personally. Or I thought my big one. I was caught when I was 18. Not my big one. I was caught when I was 18 twice, and that was no. When did I get caught? I was about 21, and I was caught really close to each other. One was I used to go into the Sainsbury's and eat the rotisserie chicken and then like throw it away.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then
but that's not stupid.
I know, and then I got to the gate and the security guard stopped me and they had all my chicken bones laid out and they were like, you've ate them.
Oh, come on.
I know. And then, well, exactly. So that was one time. And then another time I used to just go into a shop and swap out my shoes, like one of those like fast fashion shops. I just used to wear like pumps, and I would like wear them until they were like completely mashed up, and then I'd go in and I'd just swap them around and walk out. And then once I got pulled into the back, and I gave it my whole like, I'm so sorry, I've never done this before. And they gave me a slap on the wrist, and I didn't. I know I did. Should I be admitting this on camera?
But do you know what? I think what this also points to is that, like, with so much crime, you know, people used to the idea of, like, people should serve justice because they've hurt a victim. But, like, in so many cases, the victim is literally Tesco or a shoe shop.
Like, exactly. But I don't think it's okay to do that, right? But the point is that I don't do that anymore based on just, like, I don't feel the need for it. Like, it's not because I fear prison. You know?
Right, yeah.
I feared prison then just as much as I fear prison now. Do you know what I mean?
This is it.
Didn't think I was going to get caught, didn't care.
Exactly. Or whatever you needed in that moment, the overriding need for that thing outweighed everything else.
Yeah. But Jess Phillips is an interesting one. I don't know.
Let's not even go there.
Shall we just move on?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, do you know what I'm thinking? If you're the Daily Mail, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, actually...
Okay.
I'm thinking if I'm the Daily Mail are going to go to you. So, right, if pregnant women can't stop, it's a stupid thing. I can hear myself thinking this is stupid.
Yeah.
If pregnant women don't go to prison, what's to stop women from getting pregnant when they think they're going to go to prison?
Oh, I've heard this.
Have you heard that
times.
said?
Oh, yeah, it's the first thing people
Someone
say.
said that to you, hasn't they?
Oh, yeah, I've had that quite regularly. The other one
such
is,
a Daily Mail thing.
What if Rose Rust was pregnant? And I'm oh, first of all, she's not. Let's not be in an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Let's be in the one we're in. But I think that this notion, I think it's a really interesting narrative, you know, talking again about the cultural tropes we have and the scripts that we have that are very subconscious. The notion of a woman getting pregnant to avoid prison is so reminiscent of a woman getting pregnant to get a council house.
Yeah.
It's really steeped in contempt for working class women. And it's also, completely ridiculous because I think so many women, it's insulting to so many women to suggest that you can conceive at the click of a finger in the exact timing that you would need to be pregnant at the point of your trial when we have a Crown Court backlog of like 2 years. You know, it's so...
You've got these masterminds.
It's so, it's so ludicrous. And so many women, you know, 1 in 4 women are being remanded ahead of their trial. So I think what a lot of people don't realise about prison is that a quarter of people in there haven't even been sentenced. They're waiting for their trial.
Yeah, that is crazy
and it's awful. And the legal limit is meant to be 6 months, but it's running for much longer than that because there's such a backlog. So yeah, you know, the idea of a woman getting pregnant to avoid prison is just so ludicrous and it's so bad faith. But I think it really reveals something about our understandings of how we see criminalized women and working class women is, you know, somehow these manipulative, feral creatures that need to be contained. It all really feeds into this like really, really malicious narrative that's really dehumanizing.
So what is the ideal situation for women who are in... What do you want to see as through the Level Up campaign for women who are caught up in the justice system?
I just want them to get the help that they should have had so much sooner in life. You know, I want us to have a functional benefit system where single mothers can provide for their families without having to resort to other means in order to make money. You know, I want to have women who are struggling with addiction to be able to actually access a rehab. We've lost so many rehabs through austerity. Unless you've got like thousands and thousands of family money, being able to get access to a detox and an NHS-sponsored rehab placement is like next to impossible. Let alone in a women-only environment, which is what so many women need because addiction stems from trauma, which for so many women is sexual trauma. So I want women to have support and resources financially to access what they need to live a life that's one of safety, dignity, and belonging. I want them to access housing. I want them to be able to be safely housed and not dependent on an abuser or a perpetrator who will make them do things that they would not do in any other situation, but they have to do because they're relying on him for housing. You know, I know a woman who was fleeing domestic abuse and ended up living with a man who ended up coercing her into giving lifts to people, and he was doing all sorts of drug dealing activity, but because she was driving, she was implicated in it as well. And I spoke to her about it, and she was like, I felt like I couldn't say no because I was living there. Like I felt like I owed him because he was providing me with a home when I needed it the most. And I think that's how so many women end up criminalized, because they end up helping a guy who in some ways is helping them as well. And if women had the material resources that they actually needed to live independently and safely, they would not be in that situation, full stop. So in many ways, the kind of prison system is really complicit in the male-dominated patriarchy, where women are, it's so easy to entrap a woman because of the way that our society is structured, and even more so over austerity, right? So for me, it's, when it comes to women's criminalization, I want them to access the things that would mean that they weren't even criminalized in the first place. That's fundamentally what it is for me.
Yeah, because I work in homelessness, right? And I see the ways in which homelessness manifests differently for women and for men.
Right.
And often the vulnerability, like obviously there's vulnerabilities whoever you are, but the vulnerability of being a woman, you end up getting pushed into work, into being used, into the sexualization or whatever it is for your protection, because it's either you are, like, there are women on the streets, like literally on the streets. And I really like the definition of being homeless as well is also like, you are in a domestic violence situation, you are in a controlled situation, you and these hostels are not safe, and
no way, they're not safe. They are not safe for women, and also like it's the lack of I think so much of it comes down to housing and homelessness. That being such a massive factor in women's criminalization and repeated criminalization as well. You know, I know a woman who she was addicted to crack and she went to prison to serve a short sentence for shoplifting. Came out and she was given a place in a hostel where everyone was smoking crack. So what did she do? She relapsed straight away.
And you've got to think for yourself, right? So if you're the judge, sorry to go on about this, but if you're the judge in that, or you're the prosecution in that, and by the time that woman's come out of prison, I feel like you need to go, okay, so what was solved? What was actually solved? And you got this woman in prison, you've arrested her, you've done it, you've done your thing. So what has actually been changed? Because apparently nothing has been changed.
No, and like that's not their remit, right? And it's similar that I think the media plays into this as well. You know, you hear about sentences, you hear about sentence lengths actually. You know, you hear about like X amount of years in prison. You don't hear about what is going to go on inside prison, what's going to happen afterwards, like what the rest of that person's life is then going to look like, the responsibility of society to have stopped that even happening in the first place. It's almost like there's this cliff edge at the point of sentencing, and then we stop caring about it because we feel like, oh, okay, is that enough? It's like this really cruel arithmetic. Is this amount of years on a sentence enough to satisfy my emotional response to this crime? That's what it comes down to.
We've spoken a lot about heavy subjects.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear about what else you do.
Okay.
What about... Sorry to like kind of like...
Let's do it.
So I want to hear about your band.
Oh yeah, I'm in a punk band.
You're in a punk band.
I'm in a punk
band. Tell me
band.
about your punk band.
I'm in a punk band called Yakkie, Yakkie. It is a nonsense word. And yeah, we just have a lot of fun. We just released an album called Kill the Cop Inside Your Head.
Okay.
We're actually playing at a festival this week on Thursday, the 4th of June at Earth Hackney, Bulletproof Fest. Whoop.
Okay, so what if we don't... So Thursday the what?
4th of June.
4th of June. Okay, so
we might
we might have just missed that one. But what about... Have you got any others coming up?
Not in London, actually. We're doing a couple of festivals this summer, but it's basically... Nice. A feminist punk band. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of energy. It's it's just really fun and really life affirming.
So is your politics is your politics and your music kind of like connected in that way?
100%. Yeah. The music is speaking to this political moment. Mm-hmm. It's like another vehicle for political expression, basically.
Yeah. What do you play?
I sing.
You sing?
Yeah.
Why is it important for you to express yourself in that way?
I think I'll go mental.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If you don't?
Yeah.
If you don't express yourself in that way?
Yeah, and also I think being in a band, I think everybody should have some kind of creative practice, no matter what it is. If it's, photography, if it's drawing, if it's like creative writing, if it's music, if it can be the smallest thing. I think there's something about creativity that is such an inherent part of humanity. And I think capitalism really strips it from us because we're taught to, we're forced actually, really, to value work and labour and prioritising all your time towards that. And in a city like London, you often feel like you're too exhausted from work to be able to even think about doing anything else outside of it. But I think there's something really life-affirming and important about a creative practice, and especially one if you share it with other people. So I'm in a band, there's 4 of us. Like, it's just such a precious feeling when you're creating music together and just experimenting and jamming something out, and then everybody gets into the groove, and then you decide to record it and you play it, and then other people are resonating with it. There's something that's just so fundamentally human about it. We all love music. We all connect through music, and especially live gig spaces where we can be, a queer feminist punk band, and everybody, down at the front are just like all of the queers, all of the trans people, all of the non-binary people that you wouldn't normally see at the front of a punk gig. And it feels really politically significant to be in a band where we are centering the space around people who would be marginalized in any other punk space.
You said that it speaks to this political moment. Can you explain that?
Yeah, literally, like the concept of killing the cop inside your head is obviously from, it's an old French slogan from the Paris riots back in the 60s.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's not an exact translation, but this idea, right?
The cop.
I don't speak French. But it's this whole idea of not constraining yourself and, having radical political vision and ambition. And so often we kind of stop ourselves from even allowing ourselves to feel or think about that. People are like, oh, I don't want to go to the demo, there's no point. Oh, don't want to do that, it's cringe. Or there's so much defeatism right now in this political moment. And I think that is what the fash want. They want us to be defeated and dejected and not bother. So the idea of killing the cop inside your head is get rid of all of that. Don't let it win. You really have to just go for the most powerful thing you can do to fight for the liberation of all of us, because the stakes are getting higher and we actually can't afford to lose.
Yeah. Do you have opinions on music now, where it's at? Do you like popular music? Do you have opinions on the music?
Oh man,
is it something that you think about?
What, the music industry?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's grotesque, but it always has been.
Yeah.
This is what Prince was talking about in the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. Also, the world has just not been the same since Prince died, and I have a lot of thoughts about that, because he died in 2016, and it was just before Glastonbury, and then we got Brexit, and then we got Trump,
Prince
and then everything.
and George Michael.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Both of them were tapping out.
And David Bowie.
Good luck. I think there's something in that. But yeah, the music industry is really grubby. That's why, my band is DIY. I come from a DIY punk scene. Some of the most exciting, cool bands are DIY bands who are doing fun and brave things that the quote unquote industry doesn't see as marketable or are too risky. But they're always the best gigs.
And doesn't want you to be fun and brave. I do think there's a theory. So I heard, is it Smashing Pumpkins?
I love Smashing Pumpkins.
So there was I think it was a singer from Smashing Pumpkins.
Billy Corgan.
I heard him talk about how there was a conscious effort to de-center rock bands, because everyone's like rock's dead, but rock bands are still around. It's because they're DIY groups that had together and they're less controllable.
Yeah,
so you went from this era of punk and pop punk and bands like Rage Against the Machine and Nirvana and all of that stuff to and there's lots of dynamics that made it happen, to single producer, single pop star kind of domination.
Yeah.
And you still see the biggest, for example, the Strokes were the only people to mention Palestine at Coachella. It's still those people who are less dependent on the label being able to have a voice.
Completely. Okay, so I think what is so interesting about this is that so many musicians, and I think this is similar with a lot of cultural workers, don't actually see themselves as workers with labour power. And, a couple of years ago, there was a huge, amazing grassroots movement called Bands Boycott Barclays, which was because, 2 years ago, obviously the genocide in Gaza was ongoing. Barclays are on the BDS list because they bankroll the IDF. And Barclays were also the primary sponsor for loads of Live Nation festivals. And so there was this movement among musicians which was calling for Barclays to be kicked out of all of these festivals because people were like, people are coming to see me play, but my name is kind of like co-signing and being like a culture washing mechanism for Barclays to like sanitize their disgusting reputation. And there was a really amazing and successful campaign that kicked off around this time 2 years ago around the Great Escape Festival, which is obviously in May. So it's like one of the first festivals in the festival season that runs through to September. And loads of artists dropped out of the festival because they said, we do not want to play this festival that is being, covered in Barclays branding while Barclays is bankrolling the IDF in order to like kill Palestinians in Gaza. And they, people really drew the dots and realized like, if we want to disrupt capital, if we want to disrupt power relations, our collective labor power is the best way to do it. But I think the reason why The Great Escape was so successful as a festival in order, because what ended up happening was The Great Escape was the first, 60% of the lineup dropped out. It was absolute pandemonium. The festival was like, everybody was talking about Palestine at the festival because of what had happened. And then later on in the season, there was Download and there was Latitude, and then people started dropping out of those as well. But the reason that the campaign around The Great Escape was so successful was because they were a lot of emerging artists who were not tied into labels or management infrastructure. So they had so much freedom and liberty to be like, no, I don't want my name associated with that. I'm dropping out. And I think there is just, a level to which people will, when the chips are down, choose their career in the music industry, like a lot of creative industries.
Yeah.
But then, those with the principles will turn away from it. And you never know who's going to fall. But I have a lot of respect for musicians who have taken a hit in the name of Palestine, because I think it's the very least of solidarity that you can do.
I mean, talking about taking a hit, there is a concerted effort to go to attack organizations who are progressive, who are trying to change society in different ways. And I know it from my experience from people who are working in these kind of things. And I think one of the ways in which, particularly in America, and they're bringing it over here as well, is reframing anything that is an organization that is a targeted organization that is trying to like target a specific problem. So, for example, with Level Up, it'll be the issues that women face, and they're trying to reframe that as discrimination against men, right?
Oh, yeah, it's awful.
And they're doing it with whether it's trans is a discrimination against women, or black people is a discrimination against white people. And I've seen the kind of lawfare
That's it.
that people are going. Have you experienced any kind of pushback in Level Up?
Not yet. Thank God, not yet. But yeah, it does seem particularly. Obviously, there's that horrific case around 1,000 black interns and this white journalist who's trying to like take it down for race discrimination. And it feels like a really like copy-paste strategy from the States, where there was that black infant health program in California, and then a white woman is trying to sue them because she wasn't allowed onto it. Like, it's this real Trumpian, like, dismantle what they would call affirmative action, like dismantle equality law, basically. No, it's grotesque. We have thankfully managed to avoid that. But I think what happens in these cases is it sends a chilling effect to other organizations as well. So people become afraid of doing stuff in service of liberation because they're worried about being legally attacked.
Yeah, and well, I know that people are like preparing for it, like physically, legally preparing for it, who are just kind of like, this is coming, we know it's coming, and it's just designed to like murky everything,
Yeah.
God. Listen, we've had a great conversation. I've got 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
What is something that you have had enough of?
It's the 1st of June, and I feel like I'm anticipating having enough of Pride Month.
You've had enough of Pride Month.
I've
had it with you gays.
I've had it with you gays, and I'm saying this as one of us. I just feel like, I don't know, I'm just done with the kind of like neoliberal cult of celebrity where everyone's becoming a brand. And I feel like, you know, Pride has been so divorced from like political roots and disruption and protest, and has become about brand sponsorship deals and the rainbow flag and like people doing self-promotional stuff around their own identity rather than collective power building. So I'm like, I think I'm just bracing for it. That's how I feel. That's how I'm feeling right now.
Well, do you know what? Somebody told me about their plans for Pride the other day.
Yeah.
And I like looked at them like,
What were they?
What are you talking about? You go to Pride still?
Yeah,
like,
right?
It's kind of a weird thing. Like,
Yeah.
London Pride, I don't know. It kind of like, because it was all that embezzlement stuff that happened.
And then the cops.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not being funny, but the corporate Pride people I feel like they were very triumphant, the kind of liberal, queer kind of acceptability
Capital G
people.
gay,
That kind of stuff. And actually they've learned a big lesson. And unfortunately, Stonewall also had to learn it, which was you put all of your baskets in the corporate like method of like, we just need Barclays Bank to have pride flags and we're fine. And you don't know that these are corporations. They do not care about you.
No.
They are using you to whitewash their image.
Exactly.
And when that no longer works, you're gone. You're done. No one gives a shit.
100%.
And so you become dependent on them. And then when they toss you out, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And so you need to be grassroots supported. You need to be community supported. Yeah, so like, it definitely corporate pride. I'm so done with it. And I think everyone else is as well.
I'm so done with it, and like, have we not learned by now?
Yeah, have we not? But yeah, you're done with Pride. Wow.
That will be no surprise to my friends because they're done with it too.
What is something that you can't get enough of?
Bubble tea.
Bubble tea?
Yeah.
Really? Like
Bubble tea and this like Meat Puppets album I was listening to this morning. So yeah, bubble tea and grunge.
Okay, let's do bubble tea and grunge. Okay,
Yeah.
what about bubble tea? I don't think I've ever had it. Is that the one where you get
You've not had bubble tea?
the big straw?
Yeah, and crucially, you have to like stab the hole in the first go because like when people are like trying to stab it, and it's just like, it gives me the ick.
Have you been on a date where you're like, oh God, you don't have the wrist strength to...
No, but that's a really good idea. That's
see if
actually
they
a
can
really
do
good
it.
idea. Yeah, instant ick. I'd walk out the shop. They'd never
Is
hear
this
from
like
me
you
again.
get from like Chinatown and places like that? Like they've
It's
got the
everywhere
bubble tea,
now.
okay.
Yeah, there's loads in Soho, but like it's everywhere now. Yep, I love bubble tea.
Best flavour recommend?
Yeah, I like the like peach tea and with the lychee balls.
Okay.
I don't like the milky ones at all.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Does
I
it
love
not get
bubble
little
tea.
bits that go in? Do you get that? You get little bits?
It's quite nice.
Oh, really?
It doesn't get stuck in your teeth. It doesn't get stuck in your teeth.
Doesn't get stuck in your
You can
teeth.
chew it, but it's so refreshing.
Okay, bubble tea.
Yeah.
And it is hot. It's hot summer. It's hot in the studio right
Yeah.
now. And what was the other thing you can't get enough of?
Just grunge.
Grunge.
Just like 90s grunge music.
I'm quite a grungy kind of guy. Like one of my like top 5 albums of all time is 10.
I love
Literally
10.
like my top 5
Okay, favorite
album.
track.
Favorite track on 10, probably Black.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
probably Black. I love... Like, it used to be Porch when I was a kid. Like, I would say, what the fuck
Oh
in
my
this world do you
Yes.
bear?
Yeah.
I love it. It's one of my favorite albums. Black is like... Black I've been learning on guitar.
I love that. That's
'cause I'm trying to
beautiful.
I'm trying to learn it on... I've been learning acoustic guitar.
Beautiful.
And, I mean, I love it all. Like,
I'm a Jeremy girl.
I do love Jeremy, but Jeremy...
Yeah.
My first exposure to Pearl Jam
Yes.
was in year 7. We had to do a drama piece to the song Jeremy about
Your
like
teacher's sick.
about school shootings.
Oh my God, I love that teacher. Okay.
And we had to be on a.
Did you have to sing it?
No, we had to like do like an interpretive dance and like getting shot and yeah.
To the whole song? Because it's like a
I can't,
4 or 5
like,
minute song.
This was year 7, but it was.
I love that song.
I
Have
do
you
love-
seen Pearl Jam's performance at Pink Pop 1992?
Is that when he like climbs on
Yes.
the thing? Yeah.
I love that so much.
I really love Pearl Jam, and they're pretty good on. Eddie Vedder's pretty good on with.
They took on
music.
Ticketmaster.
Yeah,
Speaking about like the industry being gross, like that was back in the 90s, and they were like, no, we're not doing anything with Ticketmaster.
Yeah, and they decided to go the other way, and they like just and they kept going. They said, you know what, we don't need it.
No.
And they don't. You know, my friend is in the music industry. He's not English, so I'm gonna do his accent. But he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do some like old guy is singing in like an event tonight.
What is it?
It's like an album viewing, and I was like, oh okay. It's like maybe if I can try and get a spare ticket, and I was like, oh, who is it? He goes, Eddie Vedder.
You're joking.
And I was like, he couldn't give me a ticket.
Oh,
but
no.
I was like, oh no, I do. So I love it. I could listen to that album all the way through. Like Why Go, I love Why Go. Garden.
No skips.
What's the fog into your and it's all about like there's so many themes like so Alive
Banger.
is obviously a banger.
Banger.
I didn't know my dad, right? And so I was like 14. I was like 14, listening to like Released. You know what I mean?
Oh my god, yeah.
Like being
oh my god.
Imagine because I said like I've never met my dad. I went through that. Whatever. And so me like imagining like my dad dying and not knowing who he is. Do you know what I mean?
Deep.
Like yeah.
It's so deep.
So I relate. That's like one of my favorite albums.
It's so deep. I love that album so much. And also I just feel like Eddie Vedder is like one of the most like non-toxic masculine role models.
I often think about that because I struggled with masculinity being a gay man, right? And I found that kind of genre of rock to almost be a safe type of masculinity for me to access.
Yeah, it is. And I think it also like speaks to queer women as well. There's something in it that he managed to like really cut through all of the like gross shit that was going on in rock around that time and has like subsequently come out. And he's just like so earnest and great, and he was so pro-abortion as well at the time. We love Eddie Vedder.
Oh, yeah. And obviously like I love Nirvana, but like that 10 is one of my favorite albums and And oh, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Do you know what? Like, sorry, I just, not to keep it going for like
keep
too
it
long,
going. It's
like,
your podcast. We can go all day.
So another a band I was really into, which is not grunge, it's
if you were into Nirvana, you need to listen to the Meat Puppets.
I will.
Yeah.
But I was really into the Red Hot Chili Peppers when I was a kid, right?
Yeah. What was he on when he was writing those lyrics?
Well, I'm not being funny. Like, Blood Sugar Sex Magic is still one of my favorite albums.
Yeah.
Right? But like, some of those fucking songs you cannot listen to.
We were listening to them when we were like 11. It's so weird, isn't it?
Like, there's one where he's like, yeah, it's just the like, and there's a song on an album called She's Only 18. And he was like 35 when he wrote it.
Of course he was.
I know. And so, but like, I still like it. It doesn't take away from John Frusciante and Flea and all of that, and like all of the great songs. But it is quite funny listening to it, being like, the music industry didn't really get Me Too, apart from P Diddy. Do you know what I mean?
No,
It
you're
didn't
so
get
right.
Me Too.
Well, yeah, and it was P Diddy. It wasn't all the rock guys.
No.
I mean, Marilyn Manson a little bit.
Marilyn Manson a little bit, but then he Johnny Depped it, didn't he?
100%.
Yeah. It's really interesting, but like, yeah. I'm trying to think what other, like...
It's so funny with Chili Peppers, because whenever I'm like, people are like, oh, like, writing songs, that's like so intimidating. Like, how do you think, like, people aren't just going to like laugh at what you have to say? I'm like, listen to any Red Hot Chili Peppers song. Do you think it stopped him?
I know, exactly. I do find it funny because he's so like, yeah, so I'm a poet, and I just... and I do love it. It's like, oh, shibbity boop bop de boop.
Yeah, exactly that.
There's a one song, ding dang dong dong ding ding dong dang ding dong. That's literally the lyrics. He's like, do you know what? Fuck it.
They were on a lot of drugs.
Yeah, they were. And do you know what? I'm probably going to be listening to Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
One Hot Minute is my fave.
Yeah, I actually, do you know what? And I really like Dave Navarro. I love that album.
I love Dave Navarro.
And do you know what? Like, that was, because it was obviously a departure from their like pop punk stuff. Look at me going into my rock history knowledge. There was a point in like year 10 when I could have done Mastermind on Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like, but because his stepdad murdered his mum. And during the recording, he was the only witness. And during the recording, they prosecuted him, and he was while they were recording 1 Minute, he was prosecuting the man who murders his mum.
Oh my God, I actually had no idea.
Yeah. So that's like in terms of relation to what we've been talking about and the work you do. Yeah.
Dave Navarro is so talented, and I definitely think he's bisexual because he has long COVID. I know there's been
Yes, long COVID isn't bisexual.
only bisexuals have long COVID. Is the thing.
Yeah.
But like, obviously the allegations. But I'm going with bi because the long cocoa.
Well, you can kind of see that with some of them, and with some of those guys, it's like it's not 100%. You know, something's happened
You're
at
not
some point. You
beating
don't
the
take that many
allegations.
drugs. You know what I mean? Did you actually see Jane's Addiction is another band?
Love Jane's Addiction.
Which that song, again, not to tie it back to what we've been talking about, but that song, Nothing Shocking, where it's talking about all the TV images, violence on TV and how it's like sexual violence and all that stuff.
I love Jane's Addiction so much.
I love Jane's Addiction. But him and David Navarro had a fight like literally like
I know,
last year.
I saw it. It's really sad. It's really sad, actually.
What other bands do you like? Sorry, before we wrap up, what other bands? What's your favourite bands? Your favourite bands?
New favourite band, Upchuck from Atlanta.
Upchuck, okay.
So good.
Are they like a current...
Incredible punk hardcore band. Incredible. Live shows are so good. Yeah. They're like my new favourite thing of like now. I do still listen to a lot of 90s music though.
I do. I'm open to... Like, my favourite artist of all time is Prince. You
Obviously,
mentioned him.
yeah.
But like, I'm trying to open myself because I'm getting a bit like Old Man Shouts at Sky with like current music. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, what is this shit?
We've moved into the dad music era. Like all the music is now this generation's dad music.
I was driving with my boyfriend and we were like, it's that point where you shift to Radio 2. You're like,
yeah.
oh my God, now I'm a Radio 2 guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, on Radio 1, like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. But, oh my God. Well, look, on that note, thank you so much for coming. I've learned so much and it was really, really lovely. So
cool.
Cut.